Hey everyone, so in this video, I'm going to be going over the new S-Class Negan that will be entering the game. So we'll be starting this video off by looking at this Negan as a 5-star. So he does have a specialist skill follow-up, which we've seen on a couple different characters, the main one being Arav, of course, who actually has the ability to rush 3 times in a single turn. Now this Negan has a 45 AP, making him very fast as a 5-star. He deals 2 attacks of 250% damage to one enemy, and then all adjacent enemies get 50% slow for 2 turns. Negan will also regain 50% of his max HP when he rushes. So it's kind of an interesting rush. He can perform multiple basic attacks on his rush, similar to all our disarming toons, Priya, Henyon, and a variety of other characters. The 50% slow is kind of nice because it makes other toons need more AP in order to rush. To put it into context, a 76 AP toon would now need 114 AP. Now this doesn't change the amount of AP a toon gets from a percent. So if Dr. Stevens, say, rushed, they're giving 60% of 114 AP. What this mainly influences is the flat amount of AP they gain from attacking or taking damage. Overall, this Negan looks pretty cool as a 5-star character. The follow-up ability is pretty unique, and I think it's only Blue Morgan and Arav who have this ability right now. Negan as a 5-star does have a bound weapon, but it does have 30% attack on it, only a medium bonus to AP when attacking, but a pretty good weapon for a somewhat offensive character. As a 5-star, all the stats are pretty well balanced, which is kind of interesting. But now when we look at Negan as a 6-star character, we see he retains his follow-up ability, his rush still deals 2 attacks but a 400% damage, and then still all adjacent enemies get 50% slow for 2 turns, and he regains 50% of his max HP. Now, regaining 50% max HP is kind of nice, especially with all the infection that is being used on defensive teams. 50% will clear you from all of the Mateos as well as traitors that are on defensive teams. The follow-up ability on this 6-star toon does not work as well as it does on, say, Arav, because Arav regains 100% AP, while Negan does not regain any AP when he rushes. Negan's active skill is a turn 2 active skill, which is relatively normal. 2-turn cooldown can be used 5 times, and it can impair and daze one enemy for 2 turns, and then he gains 50% AP. This actually kind of works out well with his follow-up ability now and his rush. He can be command rush now on that 2nd turn, so if you use his active skill on someone to impair and daze that enemy, and then you command rush him, you would be able to rush a character, apply that slow on that turn. If you end up getting a kill as well, the follow-up ability will trigger, and you could get in another attack. So far, this character has not wowed me. There's been nothing really special about Negan. He's kind of unique, but there's nothing standing out. He has a high attack stat, okay defense, and a low HP, but that's pretty common in damage dealers. But what makes him truly unique is his weapon. So as a 6-star, he gets a special bound weapon with 30% attack, a medium bonus to AP when attacking, and finally a special 3rd slot. When attacking, a 100% chance this character reduces reflected and counter damage to 0. This is very important and very particular, because when we think of counter damage or reflected damage, we think of a normal reflect weapon. So like Ajax, for example, has a bound reflect weapon. We have Rosita, who has a bound reflect damage weapon. We have counter damage being buyed, as well as payback. I know some people are going to say, what about lightning reflexes? And I'm going to touch base on that later, because this is something that I had to test out to kind of figure out exactly how it was interacting with this weapon. And now when we take a look at Negan as an S-Class character, he has an enormous amount of attack, 5,200 attack, 3,800 defense, and 3,300 HP. And this is a maxed out Negan without his weapon done up or without any mods. So we can see that his rush is still 76 AP, deals 2 attacks but now 600% damage for a total of 1,200. We can see he retains the rest of his rush, where he applies slow and then he also regains HP. His active skill stays the same as well, still a turn 2 active skill, where he can impair and daze one enemy for 2 turns and gain 50% AP. Now, with this active skill, it's kind of unfortunate that it only affects one enemy. You would have expected it to at least be a line of enemies or just two enemies. With it only doing a single enemy, it's a little less useful. I do like the 50% AP gain because he will be able to be command rushed on that second turn. This is what I've done with my Negan's weapon so far. I've added a huge bonus to AP when attacking and upgraded the attack on his weapon. So now I'm trying to figure out what I want to put on the 4th slot of the weapon. I've made it a 5-star weapon. I don't think that there's anything in amplification that would really benefit Negan too much. So I'm going to take a look at the next crafting possibilities. I don't like slow attack just because when he rushes, he's already applying 50% slow, and I don't believe that they stack. So I don't think slow is a realistic thing to put on it that would actually benefit him. Instead, I'm trying to go for the increased basic attack damage by 20% and ignore defense bonuses. I'm going with this craft in particular because on his rush, he deals basic attacks. So I actually got it on the first try, which is pretty lucky. And now I'm just going to increase his attack. I figure that by increasing his attack on his basic attacks, he'll obviously be able to do more damage with these attacks. The type of mod set you could put on Negan, if you had a lot of team player weapons around him, you could do crit damage mods because the team player will boost his crit chance. And because I can't craft splash on his 3rd slot of his weapon because this is what makes him truly unique, there won't be any issues with the crit damage not factoring into his attacks because all of his attacks are primary damage attacks. So in this video, I will be testing Negan against some specific toons. So Marlon and Rosie, for example, because lightning reflexes, when this character is not stunned and is targeted by an adrenaline rush, they will immediately counterattack. So I just want to make sure that with Negan's weapon, I want to check to see what counter attack damage is actually reduced to 0 and just make sure that all reflected damage, whether it's a mod or it's a weapon, will also be reduced to 0. So for the defensive team, I will also have Rosita on the defensive team because she has a reflect weapon, she has a reflect mod, and she's a bide toon specialist, and bide is what I would also consider as counter damage. I also have Shiva on the team because Shiva is a payback toon, and when you rush a payback toon, if you do more than 30% damage on your rush, you will receive damage back at yourself and 2 other characters. So now we're going to test out this Negan against a team that, it's not very synergetic. There's only 4 characters, but we just want to see how effective Negan can be and just see what is actually reflected back and what isn't. So we have Negan rush Marlon and Rosie, and what we witness is kind of unique, but it's like the only case where an ability will actually counter Negan. So the way that lightning reflexes functions is that lightning reflexes will attack technically before the enemy makes their attack. So it's not a counter attack, even though the definition says lightning reflexes is a counter attack. Because the damage technically happens before Negan makes his attack, lightning reflexes is not reduced to 0. We can see right here though when Negan rushes Rosita, although he triggers the bide, he doesn't receive any bide damage. So this could actually be really clever, where if you rush Negan on Rosita or even with basic attacks, you can trigger the bide on purpose before rushing her with another toon, for example, if she's not normalized. With this Negan, I think you can make some clever attack teams and just attack in an intelligent way. As I mentioned, you can trigger bide toons on purpose so that you're not triggering it with your rampage, for example, but you're triggering it early so that you can apply damage without losing a toon from the 3000 bide damage returned to you. You'll also be taking no damage from the reflect weapon on Rosita, which is pretty useful. I think the major downside to this Negan is how individualistic he is, because although he's applying slow to everyone else, the damage he's applying to the enemy's team, it's just so direct to one specific toon. So if we see more camo on defensive teams, I can see this as being really useful, but at the moment it just doesn't seem as overwhelming as it probably should be. I guess another thing to note is that if we rush a payback toon with Negan, Negan doesn't receive any payback damage, but your other toons still do because they don't have the same weapon that he does. I personally would rather run Princess, for example, who can normalize your payback toons or your bide toons, and that way you won't be triggering any of these specialist skills. So Negan to me isn't that game changing. He looks good, he does a fair amount of damage, I really like his weapon, but I still think too many things can still be triggered with him. He's just not as powerful as some of the other S-Class toons that have entered the game. And now I'm going to try something a little more less conventional. I'm actually going to weapon swap on a splash weapon onto Negan. Same 4th slot where I can ignore defense bonuses and I guess plus 20% attack on basic attacks because all Negan does is basic attacks. So I am going to mod him right now. I'm going to make him an attacking character, so attack set mods. I'm going to go with attack up when taunted because I am going to run a focus toon on my attack team with Ivanova, so he will get a boost on both of his attacks when he rushes, and if any of them splash. Because he uses basic attacks, he could be stunned if he hits a stun weapon, so I'm going with a stun resist, attack versus fast, just because there's a lot of fast toons on defense still. I could do verse alert or verse tough. Not really verse strong, not a ton of strong toons on defense, maybe just Georgia, but for the most part, not many are used on defensive teams, and she was a walk toon. I'm going to add attack up when impaired because I could impair my Negan on purpose when he rushes to get that attack boost, and again, because he uses basic attacks, it'll always come into play if he is impaired. So I'm going to use this attack team against a very tanky defense with offensive and defensive characters. We're going to see how effective Negan can actually be, and I can rush my Negan now. I'm using that attack up and focus ability, going to rush Princess to try and become impaired. So I get the kill, follow-up has happened, I'm going to rush with Priya, and okay, so you know what? Negan's active skill and follow-up ability actually work really well together because even though I'm giving away a lot of AP because of Splash and even with the 50% slow, you can see the traitor had enough AP to rush, but with Negan's active skill, I was actually able to contain him by impairing him, and I still have my turn for the next turn because I'm not commanding Negan, so that's actually pretty useful. I think I like that more about Negan now, because I also gained 50% AP. So I would say this is a pretty useful combination. So I'm able to use his active skill on the second turn after rushing him if I kill someone, and that means I gain 50% AP, and that would be very easy to command rush him the second turn, or the next turn, sorry, if needed, where he's able to deal more damage because he'll have enough AP to be command rushed. So, you know what? His design is actually pretty clever. He can work well on basically any type of attack team because he can do normal damage, but with him also not triggering like Rosita's on defense, for example, or payback toons directly, I guess, it does give you a bit of an advantage. I don't like against payback toons where other toons are still receiving the damage. I understand why it happens, but it makes him slightly yet less useful. Do I think he's game-changing? No. Do I think he's a good character? Yes. I think this Negan would be a very easy character to slot into a lot of different offensive teams. His kit is very well composed, and you can run him with his normal weapon, which can nullify reflect damage and counter damage except for lightning reflexes, or you can try a splash weapon on him because he performs basic attacks. Anyway, thank you everyone for watching and listening to my video. I hope you guys enjoyed it on S-Class Negan.